We've all been there, haven't we? That moment when life throws a curveball, and your first instinct is to build a wall, to shut down, to just not feel. Maybe you just went through a tough breakup, or a job loss, or a crushing disappointment. And someone, well-meaning perhaps, tells you to just be stoic, to not let it get to you, to be strong, which often gets misinterpreted as being cold, unfeeling, almost robotic. It's a powerful image, isn't it? The unshakable sage, impervious to the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. The person who never cries, never rages, never lets a flicker of vulnerability cross their face. For many, that's the picture of a stoic, a person who has somehow managed to switch off their emotions, living in a state of perpetual, calm indifference. But what if I told you that this popular image, this idea of stoicism as emotional suppression, is not just wrong, but fundamentally misunderstands one of the most profound and practical philosophies ever conceived? What if true stoicism isn't about freezing your heart, but about learning to feel fully, deeply, and yet choosing wisely how you respond? If this resonates with you, if you've ever felt that pressure to suppress your true self, hit that like button. And if you want to dive deeper into how ancient wisdom can transform modern life, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. Let's talk about Sarah. Sarah was a friend of mine, a brilliant architect, but she carried the weight of the world on her shoulders. When her long-term relationship ended, she was devastated. Her friends, trying to help, told her to be strong, to not let him see her cry. So, Sarah tried. She plastered on a brave face, went to work, and pushed down every wave of grief that threatened to overwhelm her. She told herself, "I'm being stoic." But what happened? The grief didn't disappear. It festered. It turned into a dull ache, a constant exhaustion, and eventually a deep resentment that poisoned her other relationships. She wasn't emotionless. She was just emotionally constipated. Her attempt at being stoic had backfired spectacularly, leaving her more broken than before. Sarah's story is a common one. Because the popular understanding of stoicism is often a caricature. It's the idea that a stoic is someone who simply doesn't care, who is indifferent to joy and sorrow alike. But the ancient Stoics, figures like Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius, never advocated for the eradication of emotion. In fact, they understood the human experience far too well to suggest such a thing. They knew that emotions are an inherent part of being human, a natural response to the world around us. The goal wasn't to eliminate them, but to understand them, to question them, and to prevent them from controlling us. Imagine a powerful river. Our emotions are like that river. The common misconception of Stoicism says, build a dam, stop the flow entirely. But the true Stoic approach is more like learning to navigate that river, to understand its currents, to respect its power, and to steer your boat skillfully, rather than being swept away by its force. The Stoics distinguished between two types of emotions. First, there are the proto-passions, or initial impressions. These are the involuntary gut reactions we all have. A sudden jump when a loud noise startles you, a flush of anger when someone cuts you off in traffic, a pang of sadness when you hear bad news. These are natural, automatic, and the Stoics acknowledged them as such. They knew you couldn't simply switch them off. Even Seneca, a master of Stoic thought, admitted to feeling a jolt of fear when his ship was caught in a storm. The key, he taught, wasn't to deny that initial jolt, but to prevent it from escalating into a full-blown, destructive passion. This brings us to the second type of emotions, the passions themselves. These are the intense, often irrational, and destructive emotions that arise when we assent to our initial impressions without proper judgment. When that initial pang of anger turns into a furious road rage incident, when that pang of sadness spirals into despair, when that jolt of fear becomes paralyzing anxiety, the Stoics believed these passions were the result of faulty judgments, of believing that things outside our control were inherently good or bad, and thus allowing them to dictate our inner state. Think about it this way. You're walking down the street, and someone bumps into you. Your initial reaction might be a flash of annoyance. That's a proto-passion. But then you have a choice. Do you immediately assume they did it on purpose, that they disrespected you, and let that annoyance morph into a burning rage? Or do you pause, consider that maybe it was an accident, or they're distracted, and let the annoyance pass? The Stoics would say that the choice lies in that moment of judgment. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, wrote extensively about this. He didn't live a life devoid of feeling. He faced immense pressure, betrayal, war, and personal loss, including the deaths of many of his children. Yet his meditations are filled with reflections on how to maintain inner peace amidst chaos. He didn't say, "Don't feel grief." He said, "Grief is natural, but don't let it consume you. Remember what is truly yours, what is within your control, your judgments, your actions, your character." The Stoic practice is not about becoming a robot, but about becoming a master of your inner world. It's about cultivating wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. When you practice wisdom, you learn to discern what is truly good or bad, what is within your power, and what is not. When you practice courage, you face difficult emotions head-on, rather than running from them or suppressing them. When you practice justice, you act with fairness and kindness, even when your emotions might tempt you otherwise. And when you practice temperance, you moderate your desires and reactions, ensuring they serve your highest good, not just fleeting impulses. Consider the emotion of fear. A true Stoic doesn't pretend not to be afraid. That would be foolish. Instead, they acknowledge the fear, but then they ask, is this fear based on something within my control or something outside of it? If it's something outside, like the outcome of a medical test, they focus on what they can control. Preparing for the worst, seeking information, maintaining their composure. If it's something within their control, like procrastinating on a task, they address the underlying judgment that's causing the fear and take action. The fear doesn't vanish, but its power to paralyze is diminished. Or take joy. The Stoics weren't against joy, far from it. They believed in finding joy in the simple, everyday things, in the beauty of nature, in the company of friends, in the pursuit of virtue. But their joy wasn't dependent on external circumstances. It wasn't the fleeting, superficial happiness that comes from acquiring possessions or achieving temporary success. It was a deeper, more abiding sense of contentment that came from living in accordance with reason and virtue. It was a joy that could withstand adversity, because it wasn't built on shaky foundations. So, how does this look in practice? Let's revisit Sarah. If Sarah had approached her breakup with a Stoic mindset, she wouldn't have tried to shut down her grief. She would have acknowledged the pain, allowed herself to feel it, but then she would have engaged her reason. She might have asked herself, is this pain within my control? No, the breakup itself is not, but my reaction to it is. Am I making a faulty judgment that this loss means my life is over or that I am unlovable? She would have focused on what she could control. Her self-care, her friendships, her work, her future choices. She would have understood that while the pain was real, it didn't define her, and it didn't have to consume her. She would have felt the river, but she would have navigated it, rather than building a dam that eventually burst. This is the profound difference. Stoicism doesn't teach you to be emotionless. It teaches you to be emotionally intelligent. It teaches you to observe your emotions without immediately identifying with them, to question the judgments that give rise to destructive passions, and to choose your responses deliberately, rather than reacting impulsively. It's about cultivating an inner fortress, not of indifference, but of wisdom and resilience, where emotions can flow through you without sweeping you away. It's about living a life where you experience the full spectrum of human feeling, but you do so with clarity, purpose, and an unshakable inner calm. It's a journey, not a destination. It requires constant practice, self-awareness, and a willingness to challenge your own ingrained patterns of thought. But the reward is immense. A life lived with greater peace, greater purpose, and a deeper, more authentic connection to yourself and the world around you. you don't become less human. You become more fully human, capable of navigating life's storms with grace and strength, not because you don't feel them, but because you understand them. So the next time someone tells you to be stoic, remember what that truly means. It's not about shutting down. It's about opening up to a more profound understanding of yourself and your emotions. It's about feeling fully, thinking clearly, and choosing wisely. What are your thoughts on this? Have you ever tried to be stoic and found it didn't work? Or have you found a way to apply stoic principles to navigate?